some of my first encounters with this stuff was in the Diamondback catalog. Like it was the Sears Christmas wish book of the GWAT. You'd have on one page the full ceramic armor, deltoid protection, fully over walking, battle mech suit. And then on the next page there was, and here's some low-vis stuff. In that era, nobody was really interested in the low-vis stuff except the guys doing the work. But fast forward all these years later, and it's like there's, you can see the DNA of those products have filtered forward. Couple of the ones that I know we talked about in email that were of interest was the battle bag,
Yep.
and the low-vis chest rig. And wasn't there also AK low-vis chest rig that had the flaps covered everything? It was just a big brown, yeah.
So when Diamondback came about, when Battle Lab, their homegrown sewing nylon stuff, because up to that point they were just reselling other people's stuff. I was still active duty because I didn't retire until 2000. The genesis of the way this whole thing transpired was, as I got older, I needed my stuff to be lighter because I was an assaulter from 2000 till just before I retired. And so I was both a recce guy and an assaulter in a 5th Group SIF. So I'm mid-30s trying to keep up with 25-year-olds climbing over walls and going through windows and stuff. And so for me personally, I wanted my stuff to get lighter and faster. And then there was also this kind of transition that took place when we invaded Afghan in 01. I was in the SIF at that time, and we were doing drive-in recce's and raids and fly-in, fly-out recce and raids. And we were still kind of under the Somalia thing of, oh my God, everybody's got to have 20 magazines and 15 frags. And I remember the first fly-in mission we did, it was at about 8,000 feet in the mountains, and we flew in and hit this compound. And Air Force flew us in. They were absolute shit. One helicopter hard landed next to the target. My helicopter landed a mile off target. And at 8,000 feet, it was about 20 degrees out, and we ran a mile to the target. By the time we got there, the target was secure, but we had just run a mile at 8,000 feet, way overloaded. And that first target. Everybody was kind of like, we'll just put a bunch of kick racks on the aircraft, and if we get in heavy contact, they can kick the bags to us. And we got to cut weight, especially at that altitude. So that's when, chest rigs started getting smaller. I had designed the first chest rigs that Battle Lab had. And just so you know, the first 7 things that Battle Lab came out with were mine. So from the E&R bags to the chest rigs and some other cool widgets. But the first couple chest rigs that they got from me, I made those for guys in my troop. So they actually weren't prototypes. They were just customs. And then based off their feedback, the next one that went out was slightly different. Then the next one that went out was slightly different. And then I took those and made a couple prototypes, sent them to Jason Beck at Diamondback, and he ran with it. And then the AK chest rig came about because in 2003, I was still active duty. On that trip, there was, so the rest of my troop was in Djibouti supporting operations in Somalia and doing some other low-vis stuff in the Horn of Africa. One other guy and I had jumped forward to Yemen, and it was the 2 of us and 3 British SAS guys. And we were running the Yemeni counterterrorism force, doing from training through. The Brits, by their deployment, couldn't do combat ops, just the way their stuff was written, but Byron and I could. And so we'd be at training one day, they'd have an op pop up, and we'd get to go out the door with them. So then the AK chest rig came about from that. So if you look at that picture where all the kit's laid out on the bed, that's like the contractor dream kit there, the photographer vest, a Blade Tech holster. I think there's a Black Hawk, when Black Hawk was still made in America, belt. The old school little phone and my GPS. And then there's a TICOM chest rig to you and an AKMS. And when we were overly running around with them, we was AKMS. And then when we were doing low vis stuff, we carried AKSUs because it could get smaller. But we were running in their uniforms and everything else. And so that's where the AK chest rig came about, was because for that instance, we had to go downtown and buy them. And we were like, well, fuck that. Why don't we just deploy with them? And so I came back, made a couple, sent them off. And I had told him, I was like, hey, if you shop this to the right customer, this could also be good for lethal aid packages for that customer, and could be included in when they're passing out AKs. Here's your 7 magazines, and here's your chest rig to go with it. But Jason Beck didn't quite understand what I was meaning, and I wasn't going to give him my connections to make it happen. So that's where that one came about. And then simultaneous to all that, he called it the battle bag. It was the E&E bag. I had made those for various guys in the troops to work with, because, in the SIP, we were doing, complete overt stuff, but then we also did close target reconnaissance, and we did low vis hits where we'd roll civilian close to get past the early warning or the watchers in multiple civilian vehicles. And the first couple elements would hit like that. And then, 2 minutes behind would be all the gun trucks rolling up. So we'd already have, made a breach point and had entered as the rest of the guys were rolling up and running to the target and flowing in. So we were running in civilian clothes, a bag, and a gun. And maybe once we hit the target, throwing our helmet on. So
yeah, that's actually an interesting question. Is like, if you guys were rolling in low vis at the beginning, how did you guys deal with making sure there wasn't blue on blue when the big trucks rolled up with everybody ready to unleash whoop ass? Like, did you guys have any armbands, or like, how did you guys do that?
We had a little vest that we pulled over, and Velocity ended up making those same vests at the request of another unit, exactly for that their close target recce guys or eyes on target could come out to get picked up and have those on. But we had something similar to what Velocity later completely separately got asked to do. We had something very similar. And, but yeah, when it was a small enough hit, it wasn't a big deal. It was when you brought in outside units that you had to worry about it.
Yeah.
But that was kind of where everything started coming from. And, when I first retired and I formed Mayflower, I just basically took everything that I had done. And so for Diamondback, it stopped at a point, and it stopped because I had moved. I spent 13 and a half years straight on a team. And between being an NCO and a warrant officer, I rolled straight nonstop, never went to staff, never went and became an instructor, nothing. And when I came down to retirement time, I could have stayed on a team and been a rear detachment officer for the company going forward, or I had the opportunity to move up and be the force modernization officer for 5th Group. And I was the first warrant officer in SF to take that position. They converted it from a major to a warrant position. And I had it. Doug Bell and I from 10th Group were within probably a week or two of each other. And I think I was first, but we converted that position to become a warrant. So when I took that position, I couldn't have any ties to industry for conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave up. Basically, Jason Beck paid me out for the percentages that I was supposed to have been getting off of the paper or off of all the products, and closed that relationship down. So nobody could accuse me of improprieties. Yeah. So when I retired out of that, though, and I formed Mayflower, what I did was, as the bank account would run low, I would work in compartment and information program teaching. And I would do 30-day blocks teaching, come out, and that was high dollar stuff. And so I'd put that money in the account, and I would do 1 or 2 classes. Then I would make a bunch of products, sell a bunch of stuff. And after about a year of back and forth like that, the company had taken off enough that it was going. But the first sale I had as Mayflower was 450 of the UW Gen 1 chest rigs.
Huh.
And it was an entire battalion's worth to 5th Group. And so that tells you, or that shows you, that we went from a full massive loadout of kit down to, okay, we're scaling stuff back, because reality is, if we're running from the truck to do a hit, we have more stuff on the truck. Right. Or if we're flying in, they could just kick rocks out to us if we need it. And so everybody kind of, the pendulum swung to lightweight. And then you saw all the contractors, in the various theaters, same thing.
Yeah.
Super lightweight, because they're in and out of, commercial vehicles and back and forth where there's not a lot of room anyway. Go ruck or go bag between their legs, stuff like that. So,
well, in conversations I've had with other guys, some of the feedback I'd gotten was that, like you said, it was like, oh, you got 12 mags on your armor carrier, you got all this stuff. And then they were like, yeah, but the threat was gradually shifting. It wasn't like we were getting in rolling ambushes with guys with RPDs anymore. It was like they were just trying to blow us up with IEDs. And so it's like, if you're not getting into a shooting match with people very much, do you really need to carry that much weight on your body? And like you said, getting in and out of Suburbans and BMWs and stuff, like the doorways aren't really designed to accommodate that size of a person anyway. But I do find it interesting because I remember in that time period watching even the discussions on like Light Fighter where guys were talking about, I remember arguments, huge heated arguments about whether you could safely make gear out of 500D instead of like double layered 1000D Cordura. And it's like, it'll never last. It'll never. And now it's like, you compare it to the ultralight stuff that's being made. Now, granted, we've got more advanced materials today, but like the idea that 500D wouldn't have been enough is actually kind of comical with the knowledge we have now. But I can see at the time why there was so much debate over the topic of the materials and the weight of them.
Yeah, nobody wanted to talk about the fact that we used 420D nylon pack cloth on Alice packs for 50 years at this point. Yeah, but somehow it's not durable enough. Yeah.
Right.
All of your Alice gear, canteen covers, mag pouches, all of that stuff were made out of the same nylon pack cloth. Yeah, which was less than 500, but yeah.
Yeah, what a time it was. So when you did the E&E bag, because I always looked at that, and I've seen so many guys that dumped theirs out on their cots and like showed what was in it. It's like, it was such an interesting thing because no two people used it the same way, right? Like, it was, some of them, it was like almost just a supplemental like speedball of ammo and smoke and frags and stuff, and some people it was like a weird mix of like first line and second line. And like, what did you envision it when you originally cooked it up?
So for me, it was the shit hit the fan. We have to bail out of the vehicles. So I did a lot of low vis work for probably the latter half of my career. I'm a military case officer, and so I did a lot of low vis meetings, a lot of close target reconnaissance, pinpointing targets, route reconnaissance, all in low vis vehicles, all unarmored. 9 out of 10, I didn't have armor on. And ultimately you fight with the vehicle as long as you can, because as long as you're moving, you're not pinned down. And that, 2,000-pound in battering ram gets you through a lot more than your foot going through a door will.
Yes.
So you stayed in the vehicle as long as you could. And then, but if you had to bail out, you were fighting from it. So what I had was a small little, I sent you a picture of that chopped AK.
Mm-hmm.
That was my lap gun. So I would have that on my lap with like a FIA over the top of it, because it was just basically a 75 round bullet hose that if we got stopped at a checkpoint and had to start shooting immediately, it was literally point blank, just spray.
Yeah, just a contact breaker kind of.
And I literally had 75 rounds. And if I had to drop it and run, it was a fucking battlefield recovered gun anyway. And so we did the same thing in a trunk. So I had that, and I sent you that AK bag. So that went with that gun. And so that was between my legs, AK on my lap. And then I also had an M4. Certain times I didn't even take an M4. I just had a 45 on me. But then in the trunk, though, I had a cut down RPD, just like you see all the MaxSog, fucking chop barrels. So in SF, every battalion has a civilian armorer that can do up to a certain level of maintenance in-house. Well, those guys in 5th group, you had 3 of them, 1 per battalion. And then later, the 4th one came on with 4th battalion. One of those guys was always deployed forward with the forward element in Iraq. You could call up or go see that guy and take him guns and go, hey, this is what I want to do. Can you do this? And so I had the guy chop it. He had to enlarge the gas port. And then what I used that for, though, was a trunk gun. So, because in the trunk, we'd have like a case of water, breakdown kit for the vehicle to change tires, whatever, med kit, and then a trunk gun, basically a belt-fed gun that you could fight with. Well, I didn't want to leave a Mark 46 or a 240 or something in the trunk, especially if we had to run, because then we just lost an American gun. But an RPD that, again, battlefield recovered, It was right there. And if I had to get out of the truck because it was, or the car because it was on fire, grab what I had and I was gone. And that was, I could fight out of the bag between my legs. But if I could get to the trunk, I could grab more stuff and hopefully shuttle it into a building or use a belt fed machine gun with more range and more firepower.
Yeah.
But if I couldn't and I had to leave it, fuck it. And we had some guys literally get shot out of vehicles and have to Alamo up and wait for guys to come. And we actually had a guy get killed and the guy fucking cut his carotid fucking like that, bailed out of a vehicle. They got caught in an ambush in gun trucks though. And the gun trucks, one of them caught on fire, other was disabled, and they had to Alamo up. And I think team leader got killed, and the Fox had his carotid cut. He lived, but they literally grabbed everything they could, machine guns off the trucks, and Alamoed up until another team could come get them. That was back in the Wild Woolly days in like 04, 05, 06. So,
yeah, I mean, that's the idea of like that there's got to be that weird feeling of like when it's time to actually ditch the vehicle, right? And it's probably a lot like pilots when it's like, could you eject now? Because like you're now changing the shape of your
it's psychologically it changes because you feel protected in this rolling piece of metal, even though it's thin skin and it's maybe going to stop some bullets, maybe not. But once you're on foot, it's a different game because even if you've got a gun on you, you can be overwhelmed by a small crowd because you can't shoot them all. It's physically done, you know, and they're dumb enough. They'll just keep running at you until you run out of bullets and then they'll kill you. But that's how I envisioned it working initially. And that's how I used it in Iraq initially. And like in the troop I was in, a lot of dudes had them, even in the gun trucks. They just had them down below the seat or like in the footwells. Mm-hmm. So that was theirs. But there it would be loaded, like you said, mags, frags, a couple smoke grenades, and a whole shitload of Red Bulls or Starbucks double shots. Because we had a class 1 fund or whatever where we could buy food and stuff to supplement the chow halls because we were on reverse cycle. And they cracked down on it when I think in like a 2-month period, we spent $40,000 on fucking Red Bull and double shot. And they were like, what the fuck? And it was because that's what kept everybody awake all night long when you're like running constantly. And like you'd run back to the truck, pop one, you'd come back, your fingers would be all sticky and shit from like brought down and fucking go. But that transition though to then if I was doing a low vis hit or then I had a diverse bit in it where I had a personal med kit because I didn't have my armor on, night vision and some other odds and ends. And the pictures I sent you that had 2 different breakdowns on it where I dumped it, those were from a North African place and where I was rolling solo or with one other person in the vehicle. And that was mere just straight survival. So I did about 2010, I got asked to go onto a program. So I did, I spent a couple years on it. And then it came to a point where the company was big enough that I couldn't do 60 days in, 60 days out. It just wasn't feasible at that point. So I stopped. Yeah. I was lucky enough in my career. I did doing 40 and 45 OCONUS deployments.
Wow.
So for those, when you look at the contents of that, both of them have a med kit, nods. If you look at one of them, it has an emergency radio. I think I stood it up so you couldn't tell what it was, but if you look at it, you could see the knobs on top and stuff. I think the antenna is there for the, I had a 152, I think also. And then there's other stuff like my translation. I speak fluent Arabic. I can speak pretty well, but it's fading pretty fast now.
Yeah. Language is an atrophying skill if you don't use it.
Yeah. I spent some time in Jordan, or I was in UAE last year and Jordan the year before that. And when I'm back at it for a week, I can get by pretty well, but you know, it's been a year at this point since I spoke it. So it's fucking going away. But so you can see just different things. And I had note-taking material in there just for by nature of what I was doing and stuff. So, but that was if I got a run, all I had on me was a pistol and what was in the bag. So
that's wild. So and I know you'd mentioned it earlier in the conversation, but because it has been such a popular topic when I've been writing about it, like, uh, talk to me about the photographer slash fishing vest type thing. What brand did you use? How did you, what did you carry in the vest versus in the bags? Like,
I think I only used it like honestly, a couple 3 or 4 times. And it like I was in Djibouti when I did the Yemen piece. I spent 2 months in Djibouti with the troop, and then we bounced for 3 months in Yemen. It was a 5 month trip overall. And on one of the things we tried to do was snatch the number 2 guy in Africa. He was flying through the capital, Djibouti airport. And I don't know if this ever went public or not, but so they had intel that this guy's coming in and he's on a commercial airliner. Well, they didn't know if he was going to like commandeer the aircraft and try to fly it into the base, because the base had about 1,200 Marines on it. And then it had a DeSoto, the Siege DeSoto HOA, which was covering, the whole Horn of Africa. So we had, I don't know, 200 people or something. And so I go to a meeting, it's me and my boss and the chief of station, the head of the base for the Marines, and then all of his G shops, because he was a general, so like G1, G2, G3, whatever. And at one point, he kicked everybody out except the G2 and the G3 and us. And the chief briefed us and said, we don't know if this guy's going to fly the airplane into the camp or if he's just transiting. So they immediately were like, okay, well, we have to take precautions. We'll evacuate the camp. So everybody is fucking, they sound the horn. Everybody's fucking going except us. We're packing up and we're going to the airport, because if the guy lands, we're going to try to take him.
And snatch him. Yeah.
Yeah. So we put recce teams in the grass and the taxiways and ghillie suits. So if, we could ID him coming off the plane, we could fucking shoot him, whatever. And we're getting stopped at every checkpoint by the Marines going, no, you can't go this way. You have to go that way. We're like, get the fuck out of the way. And we're going out, we're physically moving the barriers, and they're freaking out because they had no idea what's going on. So that picture I sent you was, I'm on the steps because they were externally unloading aircraft. They didn't have bridges. So me and 2 other guys are there to physically grab this dude if we could ID him. And so that was one of the times I wore the vest, and I had a bunch of flashbangs in it, just in case we had to get other people out of the way. We could just chuck flashbangs all over. And I had a throat mic, and I had an in the ear piece, and then I had in the other ear, I had in the ear hearing protection. It's just because bangs will fuck you up.
Yeah.
The loudest thing in the room right now is ringing in my ears anyway. So that was one of the times I wore it. And at the end of the day, the number 2 guy didn't fly through. The number 1 guy in Africa did, but we didn't have a picture of him, so he walked right past us. So we go back to debrief afterwards, and again, the chief, the general, my boss and I, and the whole G staff is in there this time. And you get all these full bird Marine colonels pissed off because the boss didn't tell them, I needed to know that. And he's talking to the G1 personnel officer, shut the fuck up. You didn't need to know that. And then, the chief tells us, yeah, we missed him. We just didn't have a photo to see what the guy looked like, but we now know from our source that he walked right by you. So, but that was one of the times that I wore that vest. And I wore it a couple times in Iraq, but a lot of times we didn't wear them like in Iraq because all the contractors did. Mm-hmm. And we didn't want to be confused with contractors for some various reasons. There were some times that I blended in with some contractors for a reason, but for the most part, if we were rolling to do a hit, we didn't. We had some very specific reasons why we didn't want to be looking like them. So,
well, it's interesting because of all the things that I've learned over the years watching how this is unfolded, it's like there's, from a civilian perspective, where you're like, I'm trying to hide the fact that I have a gun, right? I need to hide the gun on my body and not let anybody in polite society know that I have it. And then there's, in military and federal law enforcement work, there's this other realm where it's like, well, it's kind of understood that we have guns. We're not hiding that fact. We're just trying to hide our intentions more, in some cases, and what we're here to do. And it's that whole like kind of code shifting where you're like, instead of trying to pretend like you don't have it. It's just like, I just need you to not realize what I'm doing until it's too late for you, to realize I'm doing it to you. And I think it's like a very, it's an interesting mindset difference, especially having dealt so extensively with like the civilian concealed carry market. Like, oh yeah, there's a whole lot of other things through reducing or shifting your visibility that have nothing to do with masking the actual firearm. It's about some other thing.
Yeah. And it was, part of it too was, by like the 0506 timeframe, Blackwater was already getting a bad name or kind of casting a bad shadow on some of the contracting elements. Like an incident, I'd gone outside the wire at Bayat to go pick up a source and bring him back in. So I drive out by myself, go pick a dude up, and I was just masking myself as a construction contractor. Like I had a construction helmet on my dash. I'd have some shovels and rakes in the bed of the pickup, and when I would do that alone, I would have concealed armor on, a pistol, and I usually had like an MP5 or something stuck between my legs, just literally a bullet hose at the window.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go pick a dude up, and also the guy, if he was questioned, could lie and go, "Hey, I'm just trying to get a job. I got to feed my family. They've got a ton of construction projects going on. That's what I'm trying to do."
Yeah.
So you don't want to go dressed up like a freaking contractor wielding a gun downtown. I remember one of those times I picked a dude up, I took him back, dropped him off, and I'm rolling back to our compound because I was at Area 4 with the Iraqi counter-terrorist force then. And I get behind a fucking vehicle convoy of Blackwater inside the wire, and the motherfucker was pointing his PKM at me the whole time, like telling me to back up. And I'm looking, I've got a full beard. I'm obviously fucking white.
Yeah.
And I'm flipping him off. And so the small PX was right across from our gate. So they pull in there, I pull up, I get out of the van, I walk up to the dude on PKM, and I'm like, "Who the fuck do you work for?" And he was like, "Fuck you, motherfucker." And I was like, "Okay." So I walked up to the lead vehicle and said, "Who the fuck do you work for?" And he was like, "Blackwater." "Why, motherfucker?" I was like, "Got it. Don't ever come to my compound to train again." Because we had the only range facility that basically all the contracting elements would come to at Area 4, because we had, short ranges, sniper ranges. You could do anything there. So the next time I walked in and told our ops sergeant, I was like, "Blackwater's no longer welcome here." He's like, "Okay, got it." And then he was like, "What happened?" I told him. So the next time they showed up, they're fucking like, "Yeah, you guys aren't welcome. You can ask your guy who was pointing a PKM at our guy inside the wire," and then told him to fuck off. And he was like, So they had already cast enough bad shadow on contracting that you didn't want to be out in town with a fucking looking like a contractor if we were trying to do a close target recce or something like that.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. It's wild to think about how much things evolved over there during the time period. And of course, then as the political scene was shifting and, Dine went through their troubles, TC was in their ages, all those, and now it's like, you fast forward this many years later and it's like all the companies have like merged together or been absorbed by another one, and names have changed, but it's there's still a bunch of contracting work going on out there, but you can tell there's definitely a cultural shift in some of the ways they do it.
Yeah, as it's shrunk, so in the very beginning, I mean, your qualifications had to be outrageous to get on. And then, as it blew up, you could be a mall cop and get hired, because they just were filling bodies at that point. Well, it swung the other direction again, where there's so little of it going on that it's so high end that you've got to be this, super duper trooper with a ton of experience to freaking get those jobs now. But the pay has also swung back up there. So some of those jobs are paying $1,200-1,500 a day now again.
No kidding.
Yeah, depending on where you're working and what you're doing and what your quals are to do it. But I sent you one of the photos was me at a meeting, and I just put on their covert body armor. Mm-hmm. That's how I would roll. So I'm at a meeting, and that's down in southeast Iraq. The guy next to me is a prince of one of the 7 original tribes of Arabia, and but I'm going into a meeting. I don't want to look like I'm some gun-toting dude there to roust them up. So for that one, just because of the way we rolled and where the area was, I wore armor to it. But you could see I'm as low vis as I can get. I got armor on and a pistol and maybe an extra magazine. But but that's, you just kind of tempered it by what you were doing. But in the car, then I had, we had two vehicles. I think there were four of us. And then, but in the car though, I had my M4. I had a chest rig to throw back on, helmet if I needed it, a bailout bag, trunk was full of stuff, just out of sight, out of mind. But in the meeting, I'm looking the part like, hey, I'm there to listen and, do what I can for you. So,
well, it's funny, the parallels there, because it goes all the way back to what you were saying about the helicopter with the rucks, where it's like, we'll just throw bags of ammo out to you if you need more. It's like, well, the vehicle is light, it's mobility, and we've got more ammo and water and bangs and everything in there if we need it. So, on of the stuff that you had designed, actually, like you spent 20 some years designing gear at this point, like what were there evolutionary things that you would have done with any of the bags or with the chest rigs that you never got a chance to do? I mean, obviously, like there were always external requirements driving a lot of the stuff you guys did with velocity and stuff, but like, what was there anything you're like, I wish I would have done this, I would have gone this direction with it if I could have?
I don't know. So we went a completely different direction later on with velocity, because what we saw was, if you have a 10-man team that comes in, they can buy 5 different colors of the same bag and they're still in uniform.
Yeah.
So what we ended up doing later on, and that's how it kind of evolved, where you could see a contracting team out in a protective detail, and they're in civilian clothes, but they've all got the same bag, they've all got the same vest on, they've all, they all stand out, which is fine because they are a protective detail overtly there. When we swung harder into the low vis side, we just started making inserts. We went out and bought several different sized bags, made different inserts where one side would be solid Velcro and the other side would be Molly and Velcro. And then we just sold it with Velcro tabs that you could hand sew into any bag to hold it in place.
Yeah.
And we did that because the guys that are truly doing low vis stuff are buying it out of the local markets in their area of operations.
Yeah.
Then they're taking the insert, whichever size fit, hand sewing the tabs in, and now they've got a local bag. So if they're dressed locally, they're not wearing something that is too quality made, the wrong colors, the wrong shape, size, whatever. So we just kind of rolled with the times and with the customer, and we still made some overt bags, but we made them in some brighter colors because State Department was buying them, some other customers. And that's where like the gray and the blue bags came in. We made them out of the 1050D nylon. They called it the ballistic nylon for some reason.
Yeah, like what Samsonite uses to make luggage, basically.
Exactly, because it looked like a more off the shelf. We put a little bit more aesthetic, features on it. But at the end of the day, it still held frags and mags and a radio. The sling bag, I sent you a couple pictures of that. That was one of those things where that one will fit a 148 or a 152 with the antenna on it in the side pocket, an MP7 inside of it, or an MP5K, and magazines for it, and all in that bag. And you could basically flip that bag around, unzip it, and get it on. We made those custom for a couple years just for one element. And so I don't think I would have done anything different with the bags. I mean, we made incremental changes, especially when, Diamondback did theirs, then that one went everywhere because Blackhawk copied it.
Oh yeah.
Half dozen other companies copied it. And then, in the UK side, they were already doing their own. There's a bunch of companies over there, JJ's and see who else. There's one or two other companies that were making, and I've got a couple of them that I got from the Brits, but very similar, just more overt, like mag pouches on the outside, no flap covering it. And so I don't think I would have done anything different because we incrementally changed it to make it, multiple colors, slightly more low vis. And then we just went completely into the low vis side, making them, specific pieces for other guys. So,
I mean, that's the thing I am always fascinated by is like the evolutionary path of a piece of gear, and the during the time when all of this was happening, everybody was way too busy to sit around and talk about the why and the how to somebody outside. And not only that, nobody was going to broadcast that at the time. But it's fun now to kind of take a look back on that era and see like, well, why did you do it this way? Why'd you go that route with it?
And it's funny too. You brought up Light Fighter, and like when I made my first the UW Gen 1 chest rig, guys on Light Fighter are like, oh, that's fucking dumb. Nobody's going to run with 5 magazines anywhere in the world. And I'm laughing as my first 450 piece order went out the door going, yeah, you're right. Nobody's going to buy this. I think we've sold like 50,000 of them total in, the last 15 years between all the evolutions of it. Yeah. So,
well, and I think back on it and I realize like, I'm blanking on the name. There was that company out the Backgate of Bragg that used to sew and weld and do all kinds of stuff.
AWS. Yeah.
Yeah.
Arnold's Welding Service. Yeah.
Yeah. They had that little chest rig back in like Somalia era stuff where it was, which I think then ultimately evolved into like the VTAC chest rig and all, which again,
so
like you're not
the AWS chest rig, that was custom made for CAG. That was their low-vis. When they would do low-vis hits, that's what their dudes were issued. And they did multiple versions. They did a bigger overt version, and then they did the small one that everybody pictures, the small black one.
Yeah.
Because Arnold's Welding Service, it's completely different now. Now it's a kit business, but they started out making the assault ladders for CAG and Range 37 and the SIFs and all that. So all of our ladders, when we go running up to a building to breach a wall or a window or something, where all the lightweight aluminum assault ladders were made at AWS. And then the hooks for freaking the caving ladders and all that stuff, that was all AWS. Then I think as Arnold, and his son, adopted son is Lamb. And
okay.
So now it's gone the other direction where they're about 50% of their own ideas and 50% knockoff of other people's stuff. So yeah, because they knocked off several of our products. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird the way that Blackhawk never even batted. They never even tried to hide the fact that they were just ripping off. They started off ripping off the Eagle catalog, and then worked their way around the industry. It seemed like, but I had a conversation years ago because we actually started off not as a holster manufacturing business. We were tactical gear dealers, just selling shit at gun shows originally, and in the early days, I remember. There were people, especially when like the production went to Vietnam for Blackhawk stuff, and everybody was like really mad about it. But it was like, well, the trouble is with the cadence that everybody needed kit and to go downrange. It's like for 90% of the people that were like, I want to buy mag pouches. It was like, was there any significant difference between a flapped M16 mag pouch between a Blackhawk or an Eagle one? Right? It was like, no, functionally it was going to do the job, but the difference was. When I needed to place an order, I could get it from Blackhawk, but I couldn't get it from Eagle. They were back ordered 6 months.
Yeah. And, local LE couldn't afford American.
Yep.
Their budgets were so low, that Blackhawk came in at that price point that they were cleaning up on the LE market. Until you got at the state or federal level, and it's still the same today, local LE, unless they can get a federal grant, is scraping money to buy armor and kit.
Yeah.
And Blackhawk filled that role for years. One thing that I don't know if you knew this or not. So like LBT and Eagle, their products looked almost the same, identical for years.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of that was because NSW, when they did their NSW LCS kits, load-carriage system kits, the big bag-o pouches. So they came up with that. Natick came up with and worked with NSW to build out their pouch kits. Well, they went to both Eagle and LBT and said, make these. They basically duplicated effort, one for output, but also in case one had any hiccups, they were still receiving. So they got the identical TDS or technical design specs, TDP. You got the same TDP to build them out. So guys were like, oh, Eagle knocked off LBT or LBT knocked off Eagle. And in reality, they were both given the same TDP from the customer. They built these. And then they both sold them commercially. Then everybody's like pointing fingers, my favorite kit company versus your favorite.
Yeah.
And then, down the road, they diverged. And then when the SFLC S kits came out. They went out to bid, and I think Eagle got that.
Yep.
And then, everybody knocked off that kit anyway. So,
yeah, it's wild that, and I remember because we were for years exhibiting at gun shows every weekend, and you'd see you could always tell the surplus dealers that were located near either a military base or near a dermo site, because like all of a sudden those FF kits, the big duffel with all the pouches, the number of those I saw come in and that would sell for like $200 for the entire bag of stuff back in the day. And now you look at what people are selling that stuff for eBay for like individual pouches of that kit. It's pretty amazing that just like any other collectible item, I guess you had to have enough of them get lost or destroyed for the value to go up. But
yeah, I need to figure some of that out. I've got a ton of stuff. And I was looking at it the other day going, okay, what am I going to actually keep and what am I going to pare down? Like I have 2 complete NSW kits, from different eras. Like one era, they still have black plastic buckles on them. Then the next era, and that was like the LBT tan color. Then I've got the Coyote Brown version with matching buckles, but both complete kits. And I was like, where do I get these from? I don't even know. But then I've got so much of my own kit and stuff that I'm just like, I got to pare it down. And I have a pretty healthy collection of my own stuff. Like I have almost every British parachute smock issued from World War II to the present.
holy,
So all the old Denison smocks, I've got at least, I have 2 World War II variations, and then I think there was about 4 generally accepted ones. And then I've got, the 50s version all the way up through the DPM and the MTP versions. I've got the Trials Desert version. I've got all of that. And I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Even though it's a singular one from World War II now is worth about, $1,500 to $2,000.
yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not going to get rid of them. I figured out it's my grub stake. As I get old and I run out of money, I need another bottle. Fuck. Okay. My first war was the Gulf War. And I mean, that was like in 1990, 91.
Yeah.
And I was a fucking rifle squad leader in the 82nd then. And when I look back at that, that was what, 34 years ago?
Yeah.
And now when I kind of look back on it and relate in time, I remember talking to my grandfather because, like everybody else, both my grandfathers fought in World War II. And I'm talking to my grandfather and say, the 70s, that was the same time frame for him, the World War II.
We've got the same bracket. It's just
it just shifted a little bit. Or when I'm in, in the 80s and I'm in high school and I'm talking to my dad about Vietnam, and it was only 15 years, which is closer than the invasion of Afghan.
Yeah.
So when he's just like rattling stuff off, and I'm thinking, man, that was so long ago. And then when I look back and I can remember, funny incidences or shitty incidents that happened in the Gulf War, and I'm like, fuck, I guess it wasn't long ago for him, But it's weird how that shit happens. So
yeah, well, and I think right now we're in that sweet spot where you look at how many places there have, B5 and Brownells, all the places are like tooling up and making new manufactured retro parts for ARs, right? Like, so you can build your clones of different eras. And what a thing that's become. There's enough people that want to build a retro gun that they are producing new parts.
Yeah, I just on Wednesday, Steve Troy?
Yeah.
Troy Industries. So they're here in Clarksville, just 20 minutes north of me. And I've known Steve forever because Molly's my racing partner for and so Steve, they've been here for 3 years now. They've moved out of Mass and came to Tennessee. And every time I see Steve, he's like, dude, you got to come hang out, come check out the factory. Well, they did a retro Car 15. What they do that about 5 or 6 years ago? When he was still
remember that. That was a big buzz.
And they did it specifically for the Special Operations Association. They did it for the Sante Raiders. And he's got a very healthy gun collection. And he had some original XM77E1s. And he goes, yeah, this is what we made. He goes, we made it off an E2 because we could get the barrel length with the flash hider so they didn't have to register it and all that. And he goes, that's why we did it the way we did. But yet he made all of those, and he still has that capability to make retro parts.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think that right now it's just like this hits a special nostalgia vibe, especially with like everybody's got uncertainty about Eastern Europe and Taiwan and what's going on in various parts of the potential brewing future conflict space. That like it's almost like everybody's being a little nostalgic for the last one. So I'm enjoying doing the kind of this sort of interview and collect the information type thing. But once again, I'm excited to be able to ask these kinds of questions. And I think in March, I'll be down like Nashville. Yeah, I think I've got an event in Nashville that I'll be down for a conference for a police chiefs thing. So
Next March or
next March. Yeah, next
okay.
March.
Yes, let me know.
Yeah, I would love to get together, but like I'm really appreciative. What I'm going to do is I'll compile a bunch of this stuff before I post anything at all. I'll send what I've done to you to make sure if there's anything you need me to redact or anything like that, we can absolutely do that. But again, I can't thank you enough, and